ಶರಣಪ್ಪ
ಮೈಸೂರಲ್ಲಿದ್ದೀನಿ ಸರ್ ಇವಾಗ. ಬರ್ತೀನಿ ಸರ್.
ಶರಣಪ್ಪ ಕೇಳಿಸುತ್ತಾ? ಶರಣಪ್ಪ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಿದೆ. ಶರಣಪ್ಪ
ಅವ್ರು ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಸರ್. ಅದರಿಂದ ನೀವು ಮಾತಾಡಿ ಸರ್.
ಅದೇ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ವೆಲ್ಕಮ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲ. ಶರಣಪ್ಪ ಅನ್ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಮಾತಾಡಿ. ಕೇಳಿಸುತ್ತಾ? ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ? ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ. ಈಗ ಮಾತಾಡಿ. ಕೇಳಿಸುತ್ತಾ? ಅದನ್ನೇ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅವರು ಅನ್ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ನೀವು. ಶರಣಪ್ಪ
ಸರ್ ಹಲೋ.
ಗುಡ್.
ಹಲೋ.
ಆಯ್ತು, ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. PG ಸೆಂಟರ್ ಹಾಸನ್ ಹೇಮಗಂಗೋತ್ರಿ ವತಿಯಿಂದ ವೆಬಿನಾರ್ ಸಿರೀಸ್, ಮೂರನೇ ವೆಬಿನಾರ್ ಸಿರೀಸ್. ಈ ಒಂದು ವೆಬಿನಾರ್ ಸಿರೀಸ್ಗೆ ಎಲ್ಲರನ್ನೂ ಸ್ವಾಗತಿಸ್ತೇನೆ. ಪ್ರಥಮವಾಗಿ ಹಾಸನ ಹೇಮಗಂಗೋತ್ರಿ ಅವರು ವೆಲ್ಕಮ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ಕೊತೀನಿ. I request Sir to welcome the Honorable Vice Chancellor and also the participants. ಇದು ಮೂರನೇ ದಿನ ಸರ್, ಇದು ಮೂರನೇ ಥರ್ಡ್ ಅವರ್ ಲೀಡರ್ಶಿಪ್. ಶರಣಪ್ಪ.
Yes sir. Good morning all. It is great pleasure to welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor of our university, Professor G. Hemant Kumar, for this webinar series on exploring the emerging domain of social enterprises. Our Vice Chancellor is pivotal in providing and supporting all kind of help for this webinar series. He is the key initiator of webinar programs in our university. On the first day of webinar, our Honorable Vice Chancellor was not available. Today he is thankfully available with us for this program. I also welcome Professor Ashwant of this webinar program. He is the resource person, and also I welcome Professor Madhavappa, organizing secretary of this webinar series. Webinar program are so much helpful during this COVID pandemic situation. This webinar series on social enterprises is a 4-day program. Social enterprises are social organization with lot of social cause. It is also good area of academic and research activities. I am very happy to say that more than 500 participants are participating in this webinar series, including faculty members, research scholars, and students. This webinar program definitely benefits all the research scholars and all the participants. Thank you all.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Sharanappa.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Hemant Kumar, is with us. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce our Vice Chancellor to all the participants. Professor Hemant Kumar was born in Mysore in 1959. He completed BSc, B.Ed, MSc and PhD in University of Mysore. Sir has published more than 448 research papers in national and international peer-reviewed journals, presented more than 150 research papers in national and international journals, and his citations is about 1,500 and H-index is 24. For his contribution to the research and publications, our Honorable Vice Chancellor has awarded the Millennium Plaque Honor Prime Minister Award for contribution in the field of science and technology by the Indian Science Congress Association in the year 1918, Upadhyaya Samman State Level Award 1917, and also Foundation of Udupi Teachers Day Award also was awarded in 2019. He was very successful in designing the MOU between University of Mysore and also China University, Huanghai University, and he has successfully conducted the Chinese students have come to Mysore and they attended, completed their degree, dual degree program in China University and University of Mysore. And sir has a lot of research projects, more than 10 crores projects of IOE, UPE, etc. And he has a collaborative project with the European Union also. And sir has so far actively involved in research and also contributed to the development of the university. His main contribution is IOE, UPE research programs, and now he is also involved in RUSA programs. On behalf of all the participants, I welcome Sir G. Hemant Kumar for this webinar, and I request sir to say a few words to the participants.
ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. Our good friend Professor Madhevappa, our senior Professor Yeshwant Dongre, Sharanappa, who is the director of Hassan Center. So I'm very happy to be here because this webinar has been started from 6/11 until what we call tomorrow. But the first day I was not here. So your topic on the webinar series is exploring the emerging domain of social enterprise. So this is a new topic where all the students and researchers are to be understood. So social enterprise is a business organization with a social intent that are fast emerging as an important segment in terms of academic interest and also the constructive competitor in the market. So many of the developing countries have seen the surge of their formation. A report from Asian Development Bank titled India, the Landscape Report on Social Enterprises has seen India as important space where the socio-economic situation is very conducive for social enterprises to emerge the variably operable situation. Socially important sectors such as education, health, microfinance, and also the alternate energy and organic food are the key important areas where the social enterprise are seen and playing a significant role in the Indian economy. Though there is no single universally accepted definition of social enterprise, there are generally believed to be the business organization driven by the social agenda. This is very important, social agenda, and competing with the pro-profit businesses, making surplus, facilitating viable sustainability, and plowing back most to the surplus to the social cost, which is central to the enterprise. Managing the social enterprise is a challenging task and necessitates both professionalism and clear understanding of the society and economy in which they operate. The resource mobilization and also procuring the managing and human resource, competing for the profit and also large size enterprises, and governance and sustainability of the key elements of managing the social enterprise. And these issues are related with the legal and policy domain, and with the countries like not having what we call in the either form. This webinar has been conducted for 3 days. So first day, theoretical perspectives of the social perspectives, and also the resource mobilization strategies for social enterprises has been conducted yesterday and day before yesterday. Today I got leadership and the governance of the social enterprises. I hope Professor Yeshwant Dongre is the resource person. So he's always a very good teacher and a very good leader. So I always he used to give the good direction within our university and also outside the university. I hope this webinar will be a successful, and those who are all teaching where there are all the students should learn this, and also as well as the teachers. Social enterprises at undergraduate level and postgraduate level, those who are learning and teaching, I hope this webinar will be more successful. So the PG centers, let it come with some more webinars where all the students around that area will be more what we call useful to the society. And also I congratulate Professor Sharanappa and also Professor Madhevappa who organized this seminar. Thank you very much. All the participants, I wish you all the best. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you, sir. We are grateful to you for accepting our invitation and addressing the participants. Now I request Professor Yeshwant Dongre to take over the session on the topic Leadership and Governance of Social Enterprises So, Professor.
Okay, thank you. Let me share the screen first and go to the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Okay, is it visible? I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's begin. Very good morning, and in particular, very good morning to Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Hemant Kumar. I'm very sure that as a person who has been from the technology area, he would be the right man to be leading the university at a time, at a very uncertain time, when I think we need to be doing everything by staying apart. So this technology support, I think, is very, very critical, especially to the remote areas, to the PG centers, where it's possible to access the best of the talent for exchanging views. So I'm very happy that this has been taking place. This whole area, it's a very, very new subject that has been introduced at the postgraduate level in our university. Maybe our university was the first to be introducing this subject at the postgraduate level. So where the literature is not available in plenty. So it's an emerging area. Obviously, we will have to be accessing this resource through internet, going to the international publications, etc. Therefore, when Professor Mahadevappa suggested that we have a webinar series, I thought of giving a kind of an overview of this entire discipline in such a way that we cover, generally everything that is being taught, and in particular also cite the various sources where the material could be accessed, and teachers can further develop this and teach this, and also students can get to know about it. So that's the idea with which this has been done. In the first two lectures, we looked at the concepts and theories and resource mobilization, so these kinds of elements. In the next two lectures, we focus more on operational issues. Today, I'll be focusing on the human resource. And in the human resource side, I'll be talking about leaders as well as the workforce. So both of them. First, I think I'll focus on the workforce, and then I'll go to leadership and governance. So there will be actually three elements that I'll be covering today. One part is related to workforce, where we talk about how we find the real talent. That means professionals with a social orientation for recruiting into the social enterprises, and how we manage them, how we motivate them, how we retain them. This is a very, very important thing, because retaining talent is one of the most difficult things. So we focus on that. That will be one part of the presentation today. And in the second part, we focus on the leader, the features of a leader, the traits of a leader, and the governance, where the process of actual managing of the social enterprises will take place. So these are the areas that I am going to cover. Let us begin by understanding primarily the centrality of human resource in the context of social enterprises. Now, you all by now know that social enterprises are primarily driven by people with a vision on organizational development, that's on the one hand, and concern for community on the other hand. In other words, the people who who establish or who run a social enterprise need to have both these two. On the one side, they should be capable of focusing on organizational development. On the other side, they should have a concern for the community, because we are talking about social concerns. The leaders, therefore, human resource is the key input for social enterprises. More than the technology, it is the human element which becomes very, very important. In that sense, I think human resource is very, very central to social enterprises. The leaders as well as the workforce need to be both professional and committed to social goals. So on the one hand, they should be very proficient, they should have the knowledge, they should be very professional, they need to have the skill. All these things are there just like any for-profit organization, just like any private enterprise or any multinational organization. On the other hand, they need to also be very clear about the social goals. That means they need to understand the society, they need to understand and appreciate the goal that is being pursued by the organization and matching these two. So that's, I think, a very, very critical thing about the human resource. Therefore, research on social enterprises shows that strategic human resource management, okay, on the one hand, that is focused on workforce, and corporate governance, that is focused on leaders, are the cornerstones of social enterprises. This is from a research that has been conducted by Borgasa and Solari. They are from Italy. They are one of the leading scholars in this field who did some very seminal work, including empirical work. And they have found that these two are very, very critical element in the context of social enterprises. Therefore, we shall focus first on the workforce, that's on strategic human resource management related to workforce, and then we shall focus on the leaders and governance. So these two elements will be covered today. Let's begin with the idea of managing workforce. I'm specifically underlining here the term strategic human resource management. This is because traditional human resource management, of course, HRM itself is modern. We can't call it traditional because traditionally we used to call it personnel management. And then it became HRM when we started considering it as a resource. But resource under the already known human resource management, it sees workforce as a cost element. Okay, so it looks at human resource as a cost element because we all know that in any given organization, one of the highest cost is related to the compensation given to the workers, salary given to the workers. So what this traditional HRM does normally is to look at human resource as a cost element and try and minimize the cost, to keep the cost at the as low as possible. This is the approach in human resource management. Strategic HRM, on the other hand, that traditional HRM is also known as a hard approach. The strategic human resource management, on the other hand, which is known as the soft approach, views workforce as assets who contribute to the competitive advantage of the organization. Strategic HRM doesn't look at human element as cost element. It doesn't worry about cost. It actually looks at it as an asset. It actually looks at it as the power that enhances the competitive advantage of the organization. So it is this angle which I think is very, very important when it comes to managing human resource in the context of social enterprises. So the very first stage, therefore, that of talent scouting is become very important human resource task for social enterprises. How are you going to really look for this talent? It starts with that. A talent where you have the competence, you have professionalism, at the same time, social concern. A talent which is going to serve your organization as an asset, as something that enhances your competitive advantage. So this is very important. So that talent is to be searched by every social enterprise. It's a big challenge to identify, to recruit, and retain such talent given the challenging context in which social enterprises normally function. We have experiences in the past. I am sure Professor Madhyappa will know in Hassan PG Center itself, we had experiences where some such organizations wanted to recruit our students, but many of them work in rural areas. So when they shortlist, our students are not willing to go there. I remember once Tata Dan Foundation selected 5 of our students. They were supposed to be going and working. It was a good salary, but then students were not so much willing to go. So attracting talent and retaining them is not going to be easy because the context in which social enterprises function, the context in which they work, I think is very, very unique and different compared to conventional for-profit organizations. Therefore, strategic human resource management, starting from scouting the talent till retaining, nurturing, retaining, and developing the next line is a very, very challenging task that is to be addressed. So we should focus on that part first and see what needs to be done in the context of social enterprises. The first is getting the workforce, or maybe what you can call is the acquisition function, where you need to acquire the good human resource. As a first stage, I think every social enterprise need to develop a clear roadmap of roles, responsibilities, rewards, and a career path. Now, this should be very clear to begin with. You cannot attract people unless you have this. In other words, I think as students of business, you will all know in the very first year, probably in your degree where you study paper on management, you would have studied about job evaluation, job description, these kinds of things. So I think every social enterprise need to have a good job evaluation and a good job description, wherein, including compensation and career development path. So if someone who intends to enter a social enterprise should be able to really know what is the path, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, where this person will be able to go and what is expected of this person. This should be made, I think, very, very clear by the social enterprises before they actually start recruiting. And then cast the net wide, choose from a diverse group of people. It is often said that social enterprises need to go for culture fair recruitment and selection. Often this word is used, culture fit or culture fair. Now, what do we mean by culture fair recruitment and selection? It means you have to select people from a very wide area, from a very diverse group. Do not focus only on a small area, small geographical area to get your human resource. The more diverse the human resource, the more competitive they will be, the more willing they will be to work, and they will fit into a culture of social enterprise. The culture of social enterprise is to make sure that you deliver to the society. Make sure that you address a social cause for which you are established. So to do that, you need to follow a recruitment under which you cast the net as wide as possible. That means don't restrict yourself to appointing people only from the local area. This has always been a problem. In fact, with the non-profits, with the NGOs, quite often this has been the problem. Because they don't pay much, because they cannot pay much, they always recruit people only from local area, and by doing so, they will not be able to get the best of the human resource. So it is often said a social enterprise needs to be more cosmopolitan. They have to cast the net wide. They have to select people from diverse group, from wherever they are, who fit into the culture of the organization, and that recruitment process is to be followed. Focus on social orientation of prospective workforce. It is again and again said that professional orientation is important, no doubt. Skill is important, no doubt. They cannot be second to none. At the same time, they also need to have a social orientation. This is very, very important. That means social orientation in terms of commitment to pursuing a social cause. They should be interested in that. Okay, I'll be making a career, a handsome career, good career. I'll be paid well, but I'll have to work in a rural area. If that is the case, if I say, well, I am not so much willing for that, then I think I don't become a person who can be successful in a social enterprise. Okay, so this I think is something very, very essential. Focus on the social orientation of the prospective workforce and ensure the willingness and ability for multitasking. This is a very, very important requirement for a social enterprise, because I will later show you how we need to create an organization structure in a social enterprise where people will have to be put into different baskets. Somebody who would say, I can do only this, will not fit into social enterprise. Someone who should be willing and be able to perform multiple roles. Okay, so that's very, very important, because social enterprises normally function with a smaller workforce. I've already said, I think on the very first day, we took stock of the social enterprises and found the average number of workforce is around 20. Okay. So they work with a smaller number, and therefore people will have to be willing to do more than one task. This is very, very important for the success of a social enterprise. So ensure at the time of recruitment, at the time of selection, the willingness of these people to, and also their ability to do multitasking. So these are the kind of things that have to be kept in mind by social enterprises in the first stage of acquisition, that is recruitment and selection, where you get the human resource into your organization. When I said multitasking, again, I would remind you, all of you have studied about organizational structure. Look at this organizational. Again, I think you will be, if you remember what you studied in your first year BCom or management paper, you will remember Rensis Likkert's ranking pin model. Now, just look at this model, how the organization structure should be. When someone new comes into a social enterprise, they should be appreciative of this. That means they should understand this. Similarly, the leaders also should understand this, that a social enterprise is an organization where every subordinate should be ready to perform a superior role, and every superior should also be willing to perform a subordinate role. That is why these are linking, this linking pin structure, where you see the top is linked to the middle is linked to the bottom partly encroaches into the middle partly encroaches into the top. Okay, so it means that the top should be ready to perform its role, at the same time also ready to perform the role of the middle management. The middle management should be ready to perform its role, and also, if necessary, the role of the bottom. And the bottom people also should be ready to perform the role of the middle management. So there is a lot of organic kind of an organic structure, organizational structure that is required. And if organization structure is designed this way, people should be always ready to and willing to perform more than one task. So this is a highly recommended organizational structure for social enterprises. Looking at compensation and reward. Obviously, when we are talking about human resource, I think compensation and reward become very important. Compensation should not be less than the industry level compensation for qualification, position, and responsibility. Now, what does it mean? A social enterprise, in case of an NGO, for example, non-profit, they might say, okay, we are not a profit-making organization. We depend on donation. We have a budget crunch. Therefore, we can pay you only so much. But a social enterprise cannot do this, because a social enterprise is a business organization that competes with other for-profit organizations. Therefore, they have to keep in mind that the compensation they pay, if you take some of the case studies, I think tomorrow I'll be citing some of those case studies. You will know that those are the organizations which are, for example, I quoted the example of Celco the other day, and it's in the alternative energy, it's into solar energy. It recruits a lot of engineers, and those engineers are paid like any other engineer who gets into a software company, or maybe any other big business organization who gets into automobile industry or anything like that. They are not paid less than that, because the company says that it is very important that we let these people know that by coming into a social enterprise, they don't have to sacrifice, in that sense. So compensation should be equal to the industry level compensation in terms of qualification, position, responsibility. For these three, whatever is being paid generally in the industry, that needs to be paid to the people, which means no compromise in terms of the compensation. This is to be kept in mind. And many social enterprises are doing that. Only thing difference that the social enterprises do is that the compensation at the top level will be lesser. The founder's compensation, chairman's or managing director's compensation will not be at the industry level. They don't take home so many crores of rupees. Okay, so if at all anybody is sacrificing, it is at the top. not the new recruitees, not at the middle, because the middle and the bottom are very, very important. They should remain in the organization and therefore they should be paid well. It's a very famous saying, I think all of you know, that if what you pay is peanuts, what you get is rats. That means if what you are paying is less, you get people who will actually, eat away your own organization instead of really helping your organization. Therefore, pay them well on par with qualification, position, responsibility. Performance and innovation related reward systems to be integrated. Rewards should not be routine rewards, but rewards should be linked to performance and innovation. In fact, a lot of organizations, even for-profit organizations, do this in many ways. For example, there is one routine payment given in the form of salary, but based on performance, there will be a jump in the salary or an additional compensation that is given. For if any employee comes out with anything innovative, again it is compensated. Okay, anything that you do additionally is compensated, because that is going to add value to the organization. So you need to have what you call as a flexible compensation and reward system, an organic compensation and reward system. Many times we call it as a rolling reward system, wherein you don't give a common compensation and reward to everybody. What you give as common is going to be the minimum, and over and above that, you keep rewarding, you keep compensating for better performance and work. So that kind of a structure. At the same time, because we want people with higher qualification, people with professionalism, people with social orientation, the social enterprise also need to make sure that there is autonomy, there is work culture, scope for personal initiative, and shared authority and responsibility to be used as part of rewards. In other words, reward is not necessarily always monetary. Reward also can be in terms of giving them greater scope and space and autonomy for working. Okay, so as you do that, you get your recognition. You have scope to experiment with your initiatives. Every employee should be in a position to say, I would like to take this initiative, and the organization allows me to do that. So this is a kind of environment that we need to create in an organization that should start happening right from day one. And once we have this kind of a climate, it would be much easier to attract good human resource and to retain them, and then the human resource will become actual asset, or it adds to your competitive advantage. The last in the path for human resource, especially workforce, is the scope for career development. We all know, even in the for-profit sector, even for the best example will be an information technology company, it is extremely difficult to retain people, and attrition rates are very high. People work for 4 or 5 years, leave and go to another company. Again 4 or 5 years, leave and go to another company. Even they find it difficult to retain people, because those who work, they recognize that they don't have a good career path in the same organization. And if they leave and enter another organization, they can start at a higher level. Somebody who works for a big information technology company for 4 or 5 years would leave and join a startup, because someone who is at a senior engineer level in a big company will become head of a division in a startup, and there is greater initiative, greater scope for that person to grow. This normally happens in today's business environment. Therefore, there will have to be a clear-cut career path which has to be shown to all the employees. Provide a clear career path to the staff at all levels. Middle level positions are very important factor for retaining new staff. In other words, for anyone whom you are going to recruit, you should have an idea that you should be able to have them with you for not less than 10 years, maybe up to 20 years. Now, if that should happen, those who come into the organization should be in a position to see upwards and say, okay, I have scope to move on. From this position, I can enter the middle level. So if that middle level window is open to them, they are more likely to stay. If middle level positions are less, then more attrition will be there. People will leave and go to other organizations. Therefore, again in management terms, we say you need to create flat structures. Don't create a top-down structure, but create flat structures where you have more number of peer level positions, more number of equal level positions. When you do that, the mobility would be there and people will be in a position to remain in the organization, and retaining people is possible. Also, create opportunities to participate and involve in decision-making process. This is also equally important because when you are bringing the best people, they look to not only performing a job, they also look to be involved in organization building. So that should happen. And in the organizational building process, participating in the decision making is very, very important. So in a way, a social enterprise is a multi-stakeholder organization, and all these different stakeholders need to be involved in the process of finally deciding on something. And workforce is a very important stakeholder. There should be enough scope for the workforce to be able to participate in decision making. That should be taken care of. Also, make a provision for exit options, especially those related to independent entrepreneurial initiatives. Now, what do we mean by this? Social enterprises need to make sure that, it is not possible to elevate everybody. It is not possible to go on promoting everybody in any organization, also in case of a social enterprise. So, to make people happy, to remain happy, I think social enterprises need to essentially make sure that there is a provision made for them to 1 minute. Okay, so there should be a provision where people, if they move, they should be able to move out and start something on their own. So a social enterprise should be able to motivate people to be able to start similar enterprises. Okay, so if they are leaving, they are not leaving to get another job in another organization, but they are leaving to start something on their own. So that kind of a career path need to be developed, and those who earn experience and those who earn the necessary professionalism, competence, should be able to move out and start a similar organization, one more organization, or something for a different social cause. So that means you are not only getting good, talented, professional staff, but you are also converting them into leaders. You are also converting them into entrepreneurs. That kind of a roadmap need to be created. And when you have that, it becomes easy to get talented staff. It becomes easier to retain them. It becomes easier to make them contribute in terms of a competitive advantage to the organization. So these are to be kept in mind, which very clearly says that human resource management is not an easy task. It is very important and difficult task. So all social enterprises have to move towards strategic human resource management. And in their way of doing that, they should create these paths, okay? Starting from acquisition, how you are going to take them, and then retaining them, and then showing them a career path, giving them compensation and rewards, and showing them a career path. These areas will have to be carefully thought over and planned. So when that is done, human resource in terms of the good workforce will be available and the organization can do well. Okay. The last part of the human resource related to the workforce is, let me just give some findings of an empirical study on workforce and human resource in social enterprises in Indian context. I will later give the reference of this to you. You can go through this report and you will get a lot more very interesting data in that. Most of the social enterprises will have small workforce in this survey. Okay, 64% had less than 20, and therefore very compact and cohesive. Social enterprises normally are compact and cohesive, which means from the top to the bottom, if you take there are 20 people, obviously it means everybody will be seeing everyone every day and everybody will be talking to each other in person. So there is a lot of cohesiveness in the social enterprises within the human resource. The social enterprises in India mostly focus on soft skills while recruiting new staff. Okay, so when they are recruiting, they are focusing more on the soft skills. Over 70% of the social enterprises. So they look at the soft skill, ability of an individual to negotiate, ability of an individual to work with people, ability of an individual to articulate and communicate. Okay, so ability of an individual to be flexible. Now these are, I think, parts of the soft skill. So many of them, they look for people on this because they know other things can be given in the form of a training. 84% of them essentially rely on on-the-job training. So they provide on-the-job training to the workforce. Recruitment of qualified and interested staff is seen as the biggest challenge by most social enterprises in India. So we have been seeing this. This is also for profit, but mostly for the social enterprises. 70% of them felt it's a very big challenge for them to really get the good people. Providing positive work environment, emphasizing the social impact, and rewarding the performance are the major retention strategies followed by social enterprise. So whatever I have said in terms of the theoretical things here, you find them reflected in social enterprises in India. They try, for them also, getting right persons is the biggest challenge. They also rely on soft skills, okay? And they also use a combination of things, okay, like positive work environment, where you have the work culture, where you have participation in decision making, etc., and emphasizing on social impact, telling them, look here, you are making a social difference, right? And rewarding the performance. So these are followed by Indian social enterprises in order to retain the staff. Okay, this is the overview related to strategic HRM in connection with the workforce. This is related to the workforce. During discussion, I mean, if you have questions on any one of these, I'll elaborate on this. Now we move on to the second part of the human resource, which is the leaders, and linked to the leader is the governance. So there are two more issues that we are going to cover. We say enlightened leadership is the backbone of social enterprises. A leader of a social enterprise need not be somebody who is aggressively capturing the market. Okay, a leader need not be somebody who is always, sort of conquering the market. Not necessary. But a leader will have to be enlightened. The word enlightened is often used for spiritual leaders, not so much for the business leaders. But that word is being used often because the leader, he or she in a social enterprise, need to be able to understand that they are different from a for-profit organization. Their purpose is very, very different. They compete with for-profit organization, but they don't have to follow the same methods which the for-profits follow because the purpose is different. This clarity should be there. Therefore, we say enlightened leadership is very important in social enterprises. But generally, leaders of social enterprises face manifold challenges. Many leaders do not have a formal business education and were driven by passion to solve a social cause. Their intrinsic motivation comes first, and economic reasons rank low. This is a problem with leaders, many leaders in social enterprises. You see, all social enterprise leaders are not business graduates. Many of them, in fact, majority of them, they may not have a business orientation. Their intrinsic motivation comes first, their passion to solve a social cause. That is primary to them. Oh, I want to solve this problem, so I want to do something. They start with that. But business acumen will be relatively low. So this is to be matched up. So for leaders, I think to become a successful social entrepreneur, you need to match your social intent, your social motivation to serve a social cause with enough of a business acumen. That is required. But on the field, many times we don't find this. So this is very, very important. Therefore, conscious efforts are needed to develop leadership skills required for leading a competitive organization. So the difference between the leader of a social enterprise and the leader of a non-profit organization or an NGO is this. If you are a leader of an NGO, you can afford to be driven more by your passion and more by your concern for social cause, because in any case, you will be depending on the charity or the donation that comes to you from those who have similar kind of a passion. Okay. But in a social enterprise, you can't afford doing it, because a social enterprise generally doesn't get much in terms of grant or donation. It might get something. I'm not saying it is not to be taken, but it will be less. You will have to depend increasingly on your own income, which means you have to earn that income. In order to earn that income, you need that competence, which is the competence required to run a competitive organization. Okay, so conscious efforts are to be made by leaders to develop this skill. Of course, they need to retain their social concern, but they have to become more professional, and more competitive skills are also required for leaders. Let us look at the leadership styles. Even though leaders differ, even though the sectors where the leaders are, the social enterprise leaders are working, it differs. There are certain similarities in the social enterprise leaders that is noticed world over. And a study of the successful social entrepreneurs who have won the Schwab Social Entrepreneur Award. Schwab is one of the global foundation which every year recognizes and awards successful social entrepreneurs. It's one of the very reputed international award. So a survey was made a few years ago, when the survey focused on all those entrepreneurs who were awarded this Schwab Award, which means they were all successful social entrepreneurs. And it found, number one, a typical Schwab social entrepreneur is between the age of 42 and 65, which also means most of them have started very young, because to be successful social entrepreneur and to get this award, normally it takes around 15 to 20 years after starting your organization. So if you are in your 40s when you get this award, that means you should have started in your 20s. Okay. So the fact that the Schwab Social Entrepreneurs awardees, those who have won the award, were in the age group of 40 to 65, also means that they have started quite early as youngsters. Obviously, because young people are more motivated towards social cause. 76% of them were in the age group of 42 and 65. Most of them were founders, which also means those who founded social enterprises have remained in that organization for a fairly long time, 88% of them. Or a chief executive officer or a CEO, more than 50% of them. Okay. And most of them hold a master's degree, more than nearly 40% of them hold a master's degree. This only indicates what is the background of these people. Social entrepreneurs are fairly well educated. social enterprises start young. Social enterprises remain, leaders remain for long period in the organization. Okay. Also, most of them were found, the social enterprises which they started were in the age group of 10 to 19. That means the social enterprises are more than 10 years old. To become eligible to get that award, you should be performing over a period of time, 10 to 19. This is what I said. They must have started young. And majority of them, they employed anywhere between 26 to 100 people. That is 50% of them. But if you take other 50%, they will be less than 26. So this is, just to give an idea as to what is the background of the social enterprise leaders world over. However, social entrepreneurs, that is the leaders, seem to be rather similar in their leadership style. Even though these differences are there, they are similar in the leadership style. The study found that Schwab social entrepreneurs across the board scored very high in ethical leadership, transformational leadership, and empowering leadership, with a mean ranging from 5.15 to 6 out of a maximum of 7, which means what is the quality of the successful social entrepreneur? This seemed to be more or less same among all successful entrepreneurs. What is that quality? First one is they were ethical leaders. Okay, so they would always be trying to uphold the rules. They would always be trying to do things within the accepted norms. They don't violate any of them to become successful, unlike many of the for-profit entrepreneurs, for-profit leaders. Okay, they don't manipulate social entrepreneur leaders. So they are ethical leadership. They are transformational leadership, which means they have brought in a lot of changes, over a period of time. They have transformed situations, okay, from existing to something new, something positive. They have also been empowering leadership. That means they were trying to empower others to become leaders. Not only that, they were leaders, but they were also helping others to become leaders. Okay, so they were ethical leaders, they were transformational leaders, and they were empowering leaders. And this is more or less similar with almost all the successful social entrepreneurs. So simply stated, we can therefore say, to be a successful social entrepreneur or to be a successful leader in a social enterprise, a leader on the one hand, of course, need to know things, need to be professional, need to be competent. At the same time, a leader will have to be ethically correct. A leader should be able to bring in changes, and a leader should be able to develop other leaders. Only then you will be a successful leader in a social enterprise. So these can be called as the qualities of a successful leader in a social enterprise. Let us quickly look at what are the main roles of a leader in a social enterprise, or leaders in a social enterprise. The leaders will have to address challenges, obviously, and the critical challenges that need to be addressed by the leaders in the social enterprise are building a management team. That means one person cannot deliver. It's very, very important. They have to build a team. Delegation and succession, that means leaders will have to continuously be delegating the authority and have a succession plan, because a business organization will have to be sustainable. Balancing and integrating different kinds of forces, at the same time also focusing on the personal and professional development. I'll quickly go through these features, not very elaboratively, but what do we mean by this? Building a management team mainly consists of 3 elements: external recruiting, internal leadership, and development and retention. So you will have to build a management team. To build a management team, you need to get people from outside, or maybe you need to retain your own people, okay, and nurture them and develop them, so that you are going to have a good management team, good middle level, good top level, not one person, but a group of people who can contribute. That is to be built over a period of time. Building a strong management team needs identifying right people who can ensure long-term stability and growth of the organization while still protecting the organization's mission and culture. In the process of building a good management team, there should not be any compromise with the organization's mission and culture. That should be pursued. You will be getting stories from different organizations where the CEO will be brought from outside, and then after some time the CEO is sacked. I don't have to mention the names, but two very big organizations in India in the for-profit sector recently experienced it. Okay, they brought in a leader and then they had to remove that leader because they felt that the leader is good, the leader delivers, the leader gets profit, but the leader compromises with the mission and culture of the organization. So this problem should not be there. In case of a social enterprise, this is very, very dangerous because a social enterprise has a very well publicized social agenda. Therefore, the organization mission and culture should be retained, and a management team should be of that kind of a management team. Encouraging culture fit leader is important than founder fit persons. Now, what do we mean by this? When you build a management team as leader, I think you need to focus on culture fit persons than founder fit persons. Don't ever bring in a person because you like him or he likes you, he or she. Okay. So it is not that a person who fits into you as a leader to be selected, but a person who fits into the culture of the organization to be selected, to be brought in the management team. So this is very, very important. Let the core team have specialists in specific areas, but willing to and be able to step in for handling alternative domains. I already mentioned this multitasking in case of workforce. In case of leaders also, the management team also, we need to have similar people. They need to be super specialists in one area, but they should also be able to perform a few other things. Such team should be created at the top level so that you can take decisions fairly, you can take decisions commensurate with the social goal of the organization, and then the organization will flourish. Delegation and succession, again quickly, delegation and succession has two key challenges: availability of the right second line person and team, and willingness of the leader to delegate and hand over. Now both are necessary. Leaders should, to be good leader should be willing to delegate. That means this is my authority, but you do it. I'll give this authority to you. Delegation of power, delegation of authority should always happen. Of course, it necessitates person or availability of persons who can accept that authority and perform. Also, willingness of the leader to delegate. Many times, there are good leaders, but they always think that only they can perform this better. They are not ready to hand over part of their power to somebody else, because if the power is given to somebody else, they may not do it properly. This kind of a feeling remains with the leaders many times. We have seen that also. People sticking to their chairs, thinking that only they can deliver with right intention, not because they want power, but they think that others cannot do it. So that should not be there. There should be willingness on the part of the leader to delegate. Delegation has multiple benefits. When smooth delegation within the management team takes place, there is a lot of benefits, starting from lifting some of the heavy workload from the entrepreneur, from the main leader. Part of the workload of the leader could be reduced, to the positive effects on the work-life balance as well as on the quality of their work. When you distribute the authority, distribute the power among a group of people, the chances are that the overall quality of work as well as the overall quality of work will increase, but the stress of work will come down. The load of work will come down. This has to be understood by the leaders. Leaders need to consciously disengage from operations in favor of clear focus on strategic aspects of the organization's development. What do we mean by this? A good leader should never get into the nuts and bolt kind of a thing, at the operational level, at the floor level. For every detail, one should not be going. you should be living it to the persons concerned. A leader should be more thinking in terms of, okay, focusing on strategic aspects. There are decisions to be made. In fact, in management, we say a successful manager is also an invisible manager. Okay, that means you don't have to be in the front always. You don't have to be visible everywhere. You should not micromanage things. Okay, sometimes when a leader becomes very strong, there will be a lot of micromanagement, and that should not happen. If that happens, then I think people don't feel the freedom. They don't get the freedom. You should do that. The successful future of social enterprise depends heavily on the openness of the founder for a succession plan. No one is irreplaceable. Leaders should always keep in mind, no leader should think that if I am not there, organization will collapse. That feeling should not be there. And the leader should always be willing to say, okay, my time is up and somebody else will have to take over. That idea of giving it up, I think, is very, very important among the leaders. Still, in practice, when the survey result is taken, even among the successful social entrepreneurs, only 31.5% of them had a clear succession plan. So this is a very, very critical issue of leadership. They are all successful leaders, but in their organization, they still don't have a very good succession plan. This happens with many very good organizations, whether it is for profit, whether it is an NGO, this has been a problem. As long as that very good leader is there, things work. Suddenly, that leader is not there anymore. Then what is going to happen? The second line, bringing the second line through a succession plan is not there. That should not happen. If a social enterprise really has to come out with good leaders, then those leaders should focus on putting in place a good succession plan, so that as long as they are there, they are performing well. But when they are not there, nothing will happen to the organization. There is always ready, other leaders are ready to take over. That kind of a situation can be built through good delegation and succession plan. Balancing and integrating. Effective social enterprise leaders are always focusing on balancing the differing interests, attitudes, and even conflicts, which are very common. In any organization, these things are common, especially organizations with social orientation, these things will come up. So effective leaders need to balance these differences and ensure that they will not affect the organizational performance. Similarly, integrating the interests and ideas of various stakeholders into organizational activity is a responsibility of the leader. People, come out with new ideas. People give many ideas and differing ideas. So the leader should be in a position to integrate those ideas in the organizational decision making, organizational strategies, performance, etc. Only then you become a good leader. The personality and attitude of the leader is a key factor facilitating such balancing and interaction. So how are you as a person will decide on the integration. This integration, this balancing should not be because you are all powerful. You can bring in discipline on gunpoint. Okay, you hold the gun, everybody will be disciplined. But that is not the right discipline. Because you have a dominating personality, others keep silent. That should not be a leader's approach in a social enterprise, right? It should be effective integration, effective balancing, where everybody is convinced. Not that everybody is simply made silent, but everybody is convinced, yes, this is the right way. So that kind of balancing and integration is necessary. At the same time, however, a leader of a social enterprise cannot leave everything to others. Leaders in social enterprises need to pursue continuous personal and professional development. The key findings of the survey of successful leaders has shown this. Okay. For example, the field of activity demands new skills, new knowledge, and insights into changing dimensions of economic and social issues. Therefore, equipping oneself is a perpetual process. For a social entrepreneur, nothing is a finished product. for a leader, like a new recruitee, they have to continue to learn. This is there. Leader's role is finally spiritual, all about where the leader stands in ethical standards. Therefore, personal development is pursuing the path of self-actualization. A good social entrepreneur, a good social enterprise leader is the one who continuously pursues and moves towards self-actualization. Therefore, best of managers have always said that the moment I found a spiritual satisfaction in doing what I am doing, I become a good leader. This need to be kept in mind, and therefore personal development, professional development should be pursuing the path of self-actualization. Again, a word which all of you are very familiar with. In the motivation theory, we get this word self-actualization, that somebody is really motivated when you reach that stage. Okay, this is about leaders. Finally, we come to governance. Of course, governance is very critical leadership role. Finally, governance is to be ensured by the leaders, but governance process is very, very important in a social enterprise. Governance is defined formally, okay, as systems and processes that ensure the overall direction, effectiveness, and supervision and accountability of an organization. I think if you are students of MCOM in the University of Mysore, probably you are studying a separate course on corporate governance, separate paper on corporate governance, where you definitely have studied about what is governance. Okay, governance is of course interpreted in different ways. This definition is saying that governance is a process of ensuring these four critical elements, namely transparency, accountability, democracy, and rule of law. This is to be ensured. So it is the job of the management, not just one leader, but of the management committee, to make sure that there is overall direction set, effectiveness of the organization is ensured, supervision and accountability of the organization is taken care of. This is to be done, and the process of doing this is transparency in decision making, accountability for actions, democracy, that means allowing participation of stakeholders, and always following the rule of law in spirit, not just in letter. So that is governance. And in the context of social enterprises, this governance process is to be ensured, and governance mechanisms can include governing boards, monitoring systems, signaling mechanisms like reporting and codes of conduct. I am putting these things together, and in just 2 or 3 points, I will explain what needs to be done to ensure good governance of social enterprises. In essence, actually, just like non-profit organizations or NGOs, social enterprises should always set the benchmark for good governance. Others, particularly for-profit organizations, should learn from social enterprises in terms of governance. Good standards, good ethical standards, good professional standards. These are to be set by them. Let us look at constitution, composition, and role of the board, because governance is a process which is mostly driven by the board. Okay, so board is a body that draws up the policies and helps management in reaching the goals. So whatever is your organizational form, you need to have a committee. Okay, if you are a firm, if you are a private limited company, public limited company, anyway you will have a committee. Okay, even if you are a trust or a society, you will have a committee, managing committee. When I am talking about board, I am talking about the managing committee. Now this board is the one that draws up policies, okay, and helps management. That means those who are at the execution level, those who are at the implementation level, to reach the goals. These boards are to be constituted complying with legal mandate. That means depending on which law you are incorporated, you have to create anyway a board or a managing committee as per the law, and ensuring that the board members have both expertise and time to spare. This is important because many times you create a board just to have some big names. Okay. Now, when you have these big names, many times their name is there, but they may not be able to participate effectively in your board meetings and making decisions. There is no point for a social enterprise to have, such people on the board. They have to be good, they have to be experts. At the same time, they should have the time to spare. They should be ready to attend the meetings, come and take up the responsibility. Such board need to be created, not just people who come and sit in a meeting. That kind of board is not necessary. Not required. Not correct. Board should be of the optimum size and necessarily include independent members. It's very important for a social enterprise to create a board, which of course in terms of size optimum, not too small, not too big. Just to accommodate a lot of people, you shouldn't be having too big a board, because too big a board becomes too complex a board. At an optimum size, and it should also have independent members. Just like, these days it is mandatory for corporates to have independent directors. And if you were social enterprise is also a company under the Companies Act, you will anyway have them. Even if it is not, it is always better to bring in other stakeholders to sit on your board, because there will be greater transparency in things. A stakeholder who doesn't have any personal stake on the organization is the independent member. Bring a public representative, okay? Make the public representative sit on the board, and those people will add value. Those people will also make you more vigilant, more careful. Therefore, board should have that. To support the board, there can be other committees also. It is always advisable, in order to ensure better governance, to have as many committees as possible. There may be advisory committees, there may be function specific or task specific committees. You can create any number of committees. There can be internal audit committee also. Now, when you have these things, governance is ensured. Checks and balances will be better when you have more committees. When individually you take decisions, checks and balances are at stake. You might tend to make more mistakes. But when you take decisions in the committees, and when there are multiple committees, obviously checks and balances will be more, and therefore better governance is possible. Board should ensure oversight, but not indulge in interference. Board, however, in order to ensure good governance, should also keep in mind that their role is setting the policy, setting the objective, and in the executive to implement. Board should not get into implementation. Again, micromanagement. That should not take place. Conflict of interest should not come in. This is a conflict of interest if they get into implementation. Board's role is devising policies, whereas executive role is implementing it. Okay, so these two will have to be kept in mind. The other very important one is disclosure and reporting. If social enterprises have to manage well, have to ensure good governance, they have to rely on disclosure and reporting to a very large extent. So transparency is the hallmark of good governance, and hence all happenings need to be disclosed as much as possible. Good things as well as bad things need to be disclosed. Okay, so there were companies which were awarded Good Governance Award because those companies were coming out and telling the bad things about the company also to people. When you do that, you are more open. When you are more open, people will accept you much better. Reporting to stakeholders and where possible to public reporting is essential dimension of good governance. You use your website to the extent possible, and in the website you go on disclosing as much as possible. Disclosures will be always more helpful for governance. Financial prudency, that is fiduciary discipline, should be the mantra. Therefore, ensure regular audit. Okay, so it's a very important thing. Of course, if you are a company or if you are under any firm, incorporated as a firm, you will have to anyway do it. Even if you are a trust or a society, it's always better that go for external audit and give the audit report, put up the audit report on the website. Involving stakeholders in decision making ensures both democracy and informed decision making. Involve all stakeholders, representatives of all stakeholders in your decision making, so that people will know. They don't doubt you at all. Then governance is much better. Respect the legal provisions and follow them religiously. So law is there. Law sometimes may not be always correct, but as long as it is the law, you have to follow it. You can make effort to amend the law, change the law to become more useful, no doubt. But as long as that legal provision is there, you have to follow it both in letter and spirit. By doing this, a social enterprise can be governed better, much better. Okay, this is about governance. So I have covered the 3 issues about the workforce in the human resource side, right from their recruitment up to the career path, up to exit, just an overview. Then I talked about leaders, their qualities, and how to become a good leader in a social enterprise. Then I covered about governance, its process, and what institutional structures are to be created to ensure good governance. I'm quickly going through the next 3 slides where I'm giving the references to you. As I said, I'll pass on all this information. You can go to that. And with regard to HRM, strategic HRM, managing the workforce, I suggest that there is chapter 4 in Management of Social Enterprises by Bob Dorothy and others, the book which I recommended for basic reading. That one chapter will give you an overview of most of the things related to that. And for further reading, I suggest these 2, Understanding Human Resource Challenges in Indian Social Enterprises. This is a survey report by Intercap. And also, there is a very good report by Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. Okay, they have come out with a talent acquisition and retention in social enterprises. Okay, innovations in human resource strategies. This is, see, they are always ahead. That's why they are IIM. They have already come out with studies on these kinds of things. This is a very good report. This is available on the free domain. You can download this. So this is with regard to human resource. About leadership, chapter 10 in Understanding Social Enterprise, the book which I said by Duff and Rory Duff and Mike Bull. And for further reading, Leadership in Social Enterprise, How to Manage Yourself and the Team by Andres Hanke and others. This is published by Schwab Foundation itself, and this is again available for free downloading. This booklet you can use as your reference. Regarding governance, chapter 8 in Management of Social Enterprises by Bob Dorothy and others. Exclusively this chapter focuses on governance, and also Governance of Social Enterprises, Managing Your Organization for Success by Mijaram, okay, and others. This is also published by Schwab Foundation. Again, this is available. This book is available for free downloading. You can download this book and refer to this. So these are some additional reading and reference that you can make. That's my coverage. I hope you already have had questions, and let me check. If there are questions in the chat box, I'll first answer them, and then if there are more, let us. Okay. Okay, do we have questions? Not yet.
So participants are requested to post their questions in the chat box. They are typing their name and address, etc. in the chat box.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there is something I saw. Spiritual
Mindset spiritual mindset in leadership means. Spiritual mindset
in leadership means. Okay. I assume that this is a question. So what I'm saying, what the studies on social enterprises say is that for any good leader, essentially leadership is a spiritual process, which means the enlightenment. I told you, enlightened leader. Enlightenment is spiritual. Okay, where you enjoy what you are doing and you don't look out of what you are doing for any motivation or any satisfaction. Okay, that is being spiritual. Spiritual doesn't mean go to a temple and worship. Okay, spiritual means it's a value where A leader enjoys building an organization and derives all pleasure in doing so, and also enjoys handing over his responsibility to somebody else. That is the idea of enlightenment. So idea of enlightenment is said to be spiritual.
Oh, sir, one more question there.
How
is
is the demand for human resource in social enterprises in India? Is there any certification courses which is helpful for recruiting social enterprises? How the students should prepare for the same? Okay, there is lot of demand for human resource in many social enterprises in India. Many of them are finding it difficult to find people. So definitely, because their number is very large, I told you, one estimate says that in India we may have 2 million social enterprises, 20 lakh social enterprises. This is what some estimate it's changed. I'm not saying all of them are recruiting, but a lot of them are recruiting. There is definitely the scope for getting into them. There are courses. I mean, just search for social enterprise certification course. There are, I think, half a dozen such courses available in India itself. There are institutes of management that are offering such courses. There is also Indian Institute of Entrepreneurship, which is offering similar course on social entrepreneurship. There is some organizations which have a social entrepreneurship certification program in collaboration with foreign universities. For example, there is an organization in Delhi called PRIA, Participatory Research in Asia. PRIA has a collaboration with an American university, and it is offering a diploma program in social entrepreneurship. Such programs are available. There is no special preparation for you. I think business graduates, both commerce and management, are more suitable to be employed into social enterprises, provided they have the willingness and they have a concern to work for a social cause. Because they are needed. You are very well equipped to move into that. Okay.
Can you please tell how behavioral issues can be handled by a leader? Sir, highlighted question.
1 minute.
One from Ramesh. Dear sir, can you please tell how behavioral issues can be handled by leader of a C?
Yeah, okay. I'll answer that question because I don't see that question here. Okay. Yeah. See, whether you are in a social enterprise or in any other organization, even if when you are in an educational institution or anything, a lot of behavioral issues will have to be handled. I said balancing and integrating. This is an essential leadership skill. Okay. When there are people, you are working with people, it is obvious that people think differently. I think many of you study organizational behavior as a subject, and you know that people have different traits, okay, individual differences. There will be so many differences. Because of that, people will be thinking differently. So for a good leader, balancing these different thinking is what is very much required. Okay, so that's the skill. It is not that always you have people with extreme behavior, but you will have some of them. It is not handling behavioral issues is not only handling extreme behavior, but handling differences of view coming out of differences in the personality. That should be the feature of quality where you will be able to talk to them, convince them, tell them why one's idea is less important, why another's idea is more important, in such a way that the person whose idea is not accepted will not feel bad. So this is a skill that is required. Okay. 1 minute. Let me go. Somebody is asking, explain Rensis-Likert pin model. Okay, yeah, I think all of you have studied this as part of your management. In organization structure, there are different kinds of organization structure that is explained. One of them is Likert's model. where he says in a typical conventional organizational structure, one level of the organization is linked with another level with a line, where the box is independent. From outside the box, the line starts, it reaches to outside of the border of another box. For example, we say top level, middle level, bottom level. So top to the middle, there is a line, and middle to the bottom also there is a line. But Rensis, what he did is, he did not join the two things through a line. He put one into the other. Okay. Now, what does it mean? It means it is not that one is superior and another one is subordinate. The superior should also be ready to do subordinates tasks. Subordinates also should be ready to do superior tasks. So they are overlapping. Francis Likkert's model says that an organization is not a entity with isolated boxes of power and authority, but it is a fluid and organic structure where roles and functions of one overlaps with the other. One encroaches into the other, or one will have to do the other's role also. That is what Francis Lickert model talks about. Okay. Do we have any leadership training programs for leaders in social enterprises? Yes, as I said, just like the diploma program, there are also even Indian Institute of Managements are offering short-term programs, 1 week program, 10 days program, something like that for the entrepreneurs and some social enterprises themselves. They offer such training programs because the social enterprise leaders are interested in more social enterprises to be started. Okay, so such programs are available. If possible, give a suggestion to become a successful social entrepreneur, because only 31.5 have clear succession planning. Well, that amounts to consultancy, not not really this lecture. I don't think I can suggest how you can become a successful social entrepreneur. I'm only saying that there are certain qualities that are required to become a successful social entrepreneur, and those qualities need to be developed, and social entrepreneur leaders will have to keep that in mind. That means, for example, succession plan. When you build an organization, run it for 10 years, you should, as a leader, develop a clear path where you are going to have the next generation ready. That is a quality of the leader that should be developed. That's what I'm saying. What should be the what would be the implication of if the same principles of leadership of social orientation is followed by profit-making organization also? I told you in the first day itself, it is happening already in many for-profit organization. There is already a move by the leaders to move towards becoming socially oriented. Okay, so if that happens, that is very good. You know, if all business organizations become social enterprises, it is very good. But that is utopia. I mean, that cannot happen. You know, that's only a dream. But that is also in a way necessary. That means for-profit organizations becoming more socially oriented is also necessary for their own survival after a time, because if people think that for-profit organizations are too exploitative, they may not like it. Okay, so it is good if that becomes if the leadership there becomes more socially oriented. Any other? Did I leave anything?
How a leader?
Governance in social enterprise is better than NPO or NGO. No, I don't think I said that. I did not say that governance in social enterprise is better than NGO. What I am saying is governance of a social enterprise is different from NPO for one or two reasons. Different in the sense, number one, A social enterprise is competing with for-profit organizations, whereas an NGO is not doing that. An NGO is not earning a surplus, not trying to earn a surplus. It is run based on donations. Okay. Therefore, their approach will have to be something else. Or their governance, I think what they have to follow in their governance is something different. Whereas a social enterprise is like any other business organization. Therefore, their governance will have to really look towards, okay, all those attributes that are there in an NGO. At the same time, many of those attributes which are there in a for-profit organization. This is what I am trying to say. It is different. They have to focus on that. Okay.
What motivation can match standardized to maintain consistency by leaders? So it's the question by Sahana, sir.
Okay. I'll first, I think I saw this, so let me begin with the last question. How a leader in social enterprise is special than a leader in for-profit organization? Again, I say, don't say special, different. Okay. Now, different in the sense, see, in case of a for-profit organization, a leader's success depends on how much profit you make. See, every year when the results of the for-profit organizations, quarterly results are announced of the big companies, always the newspaper headline is either it is so many % more than the same quarter of the previous year, or so many % less than the percentage of profit earned in the same quarter in the previous year. So the headline is always on the profit. But for a social enterprise, the profit is necessary because they have to survive. Their headline would be how much social impact they have made. For example, if you are a social enterprise in an alternative energy firm, then if you say in the last 1 year, you have added 1 lakh more customers who now have power, electricity or energy, who did not have that earlier. That is a greater achievement. So I think the leader will have to look more from that angle. That's how they become more successful. Okay, now I'll move to, what is that question? Professor Mahadevappa, you said...
Sahana, what motivation can much standardize to maintain consistency for the leader in the SEC? Sahana, below. What motivation can much standardize to maintain consistency for the leaders in SE? Highlight.
I am finding here one.
Highlighting now. What motivation can much standardize to maintain?
1 minute. The one I'm looking here, what are the theoretical and empirical gaps in philanthropic social entrepreneurship studies globally in general, India in particular? What do you mean by theoretical and empirical gaps? Okay. Social entrepreneurship studies are very, very few. That's a very fertile area in India for study. As I said, IIMs are the front runners. They are doing a lot of studies on that. So they are a very fertile ground in India, both for research, for study, for research projects, for PhD, for everything, because they are not studied much. Okay. Yeah. Next to that is what motivation can much standardized
to maintain
consistency for the leaders in.
SE.
Shall I understand? I am not sure what you are saying. Probably is. For a social enterprise leader to consistently have the motivation to work, what should be done? Okay, I assume the question is something like this. Okay, maintaining the level of motivation, I think, is very, very important, because many times the non-profit leaders find, they get into this problem that in a non-profit or an NGO, a leader would probably think that he or she has sacrificed so much They could have made a good career somewhere, but they started an NGO, did so much for the people. But by end of 10 years, end of 20 years, people are not understanding, people are not becoming responsible, people are not learning. So they become disillusioned and the motivation might go down. Okay? This can happen. This can happen to anybody. Many times the teachers would say, for example, I'm doing so much, but students are not learning. So teachers get demotivated. So there are so many things. This demotivation can happen. Therefore, I think the one motivating factor is, I said, for the leader in the end, the spirituality or the self-actualization. When somebody can enjoy the very process of doing it, the motivation always remains high. I always say this to my teacher friends also. If your motivation depends on how well students perform, you are likely to be demotivated. Okay. But if your motivation depends on how much you enjoy teaching, then you are always motivated. The same thing for leaders anywhere. Okay. In social enterprise also. If the social enterprise leader enjoys doing a very challenging business and doing social good, that is why I said that book, earning money while doing good while earning money. You are doing both. That itself is a challenge and you enjoy that challenge. Then your motivation remains high.
So next question is, what are the retention strategies for the student?
Yeah, I think I explained that, including what retention strategies are followed in Indian social enterprises. Multiple retention strategies will have to be followed. As I said, in terms of career path, create enough of middle level positions, so that the new recruitees will always say, okay, after 5 years I can move up, after 10 years I can move up. And when that promotional possibilities are there, they are likely to stay longer. This is one. At the same time, there are other kind of recognitions to be given, rewarding to be given, not just a kind of a single package of salary, but whenever a worker is more innovative, whenever somebody comes out with a new idea, does something that is more meaningful, that needs to be recognized and rewarded, that is to be followed. Okay. And then participatory opportunities, that means involving them in the decision making process where they feel, okay, I am important. Again, in management terms, these are simply again what you have already studied. For example, job enrichment. Okay. You study about job extension, job enlargement, and also there is job enrichment. In case of job enrichment, what happens? The employee feels that the job is very important, and the employee also feels that he as an employee or she as an employee is also important. Now this feeling is to be brought in. For that you need to create, you need to follow these multiple strategies to retain people.
So next question is, Kantraj, any other type of structure except the Likert pin model suitable for SC?
Yeah, it can be. See, there are many organization structures. For example, broadly, organization structures are divided into mechanistic structure and organic structure. Likert's model is one of the organic structures. There are many organic structures. I think you simply take any management book, simple management book, and it gives you, I think, these structures. Only thing we can say is social enterprise should not follow a mechanistic structure. They should follow an organic structure.
Sir, bottom, V.S. Kumar, do the leaders of social enterprise need more recognition than is being provided to them at present?
Yeah, I think they are getting recognition. There are many good leaders who are getting. I told you, Harish Handeb got a Max Essay Award. Okay, the founder of Selco. There are those recognitions that are coming. And please remember, social enterprise leaders are also getting recognized as good business leaders. Right? It is not that they are not outside the business area. There are awards only to for-profit organizations and not for social enterprises. actually social enterprise leaders are getting more recognition. Okay, that is happening, that recognition is there. As long as they make a social impact, I think that is the biggest recognition. I don't think you try to become a social entrepreneur because you get an award or something. Okay.
Sir, there are no questions. No questions, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Sir, we conclude now. Sir, thank you very much for delivering 3 lectures, and the one more is remaining tomorrow. Participants are very happy and they are giving good feedback in the chat box. On behalf of the University of Mysore and Post Graduate Center Hassan, I am grateful to you and I thank you. And I also thank all teachers and students, research scholars who have participated in this webinar. Thank you, one and all. We shall meet tomorrow at 11:30 for the last session of this webinar series. Thank you, one and all.
Okay. Thank you.